Welcome to the At the Coalface podcast with your host, Jason Greenwood. This podcast is all about what it's really like in the trenches of digital and e-commerce. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the At the Coalface podcast. And it is my pleasure to welcome Sara Arthrell from Brightpearl to the podcast. Welcome, Sara.
Thank you so much, Jason. I appreciate it. And excellent job with my last name pronunciation. You nailed it.
Thank you. Yeah, I always try to get that right. I know how offensive it can be sometimes when you butcher somebody's name. So I always try to at least get it close, if not bang on.
You were bang on, but it was perfect.
Brilliant. Look, it is exciting to have you here today to talk about Brightpearl, but more importantly, going beyond the tech, the platform, really talking about our industry from the perspective of really what is a retail operating system. And maybe I have my own knowledge of Brightpearl. It's limited because Brightpearl as yet is not massive down in ANZ, much bigger, obviously, in Europe, in the UK, in the United States, much more of a well-known, I guess, operational retail operating system, but not that well-known in ANZ. So maybe if you can just take a couple of minutes to introduce yourself and introduce what Brightpearl actually is. I know you've been with Brightpearl in total nearly 3 years now. You come from a software and tech background, and you have a lot of retail experience as well. So maybe you can just give the elevator pitch about you and how you came to be at Brightpearl, as well as what Brightpearl actually is.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I like to think that I was destined for Brightpearl, primarily just because of my own love of e-commerce shopping. So I think the reason why I really enjoy this industry so much is there's like a huge level of empathy that I have because I know what it's like to be a shopper, and I could bring some good perspective as we speak with our consumers on the retail side and the merchant side to really offer kind of some understanding around what it means to work with their brands. I think with Brightpearl specifically, what makes them so unique in this sort of like retail operating system space, and to back up a little bit, just what I mean by that is we focus on helping our customers really streamline and automate all like the back end side of their retail ops. So we take away the complexity that typically happens when a brand is scaling really quickly. And those back end operations are really all those different steps that usually will occur after a consumer will hit the buy button on a website. So that's allocating all the different inventory from all the different sales channels that you're selling on, fulfilling that order, shipping that order, maybe handling the returns from that order, and dealing with all the different like accounting entries that occur in each of those stages. So it's a lot of steps that are each really important for a merchant to manage, particularly as it's scaling. And a lot of time, there's this element of almost like fear that a merchant experiences when it comes to growing their business. We know hyper growth is exciting and it's usually part of a merchant's goals, but there's this level of fear and thinking about, okay, what happens if I'm not able to keep up with this increase in demand? Will my customers suffer? We know that in like the business of e-commerce, I'm sure folks listening, especially when we talk about consumers, like they're pretty unforgiving and you don't get a lot of chances to get the experience. So Brightpearl really works with merchants to make sure that they have the tools in their tool belt to get it right from the beginning so they can feel really confident in that growth instead of being a little bit afraid of it.
Wow, great encapsulation of what you guys do. Now, what we would traditionally call, particularly down here in ANZ, what we would traditionally call what you do is more of an ERP, right? It's the operational core of the business, that inventory management, order management, shipping fulfillment, warehouse management, purchasing, supply chain, inventory demand planning, accounting, so all the financial side of the business, analytics, CRM components. But what you guys do, you go one step further in that you've also got an integrated point of sale system that's part of the platform.
Yep.
But you also are very, very careful, particularly in your marketing side of the business, to say, look, we're not an ERP. We're a retail and wholesale focused platform. And so we don't have necessarily some of the thinking that is behind the way a legacy ERP might have been structured, we're very focused on the future, and we're almost like a new version of ERP that's skewed very heavily towards retail merchant operations. Is that
Exactly.
something that you guys really are careful not to be pigeonholed as a traditional ERP?
Yeah, you are exactly right. Where I think for a really long time, there were basically two main options that a merchant could choose from when it came to working with a system to help manage like the operational side of their business. On one side, you had the monoliths, the ERPs, who, as you mentioned, were, the legacy system. They typically will have like tons of functionality that is very customizable, but because it's so customizable, it's often expensive. It takes a long time to implement. And a lot of times there's some like unnecessary features, like it's built for many. And so this like one size fits all can feel like it's the best choice. But then as you get into it, you realize that it's actually creating quite a bit of headache. And we've actually done some research on this topic where we spoke to some brands just about what their needs were and how ERPs they were working with were fulfilling them. And we actually learned that 90% of brands that fell into that $5 to $50 million range said that this sort of single vendor ERP approach to e-commerce is actually limiting their ability to quickly deploy better, more unique shopping experiences. And they felt like they were almost like locked in with that and not able to really integrate new, more advanced, better e-commerce technology. And so ERPs sat on one side, but on the other side, you had these like almost point solutions, which you've also have probably, heard of. These are the hyper focused on a very specific operational area. So you have just a system that owns all of your order management, and another system that works with your inventory management, and maybe a separate system for your accounting. And they were really good at what that one area was, but they couldn't encapsulate everything that merchant needed. And so in between those two extremes, that's where Brightpearl sits, where we're able to bring in some really solid, robust functionality that's configurable. And because of that, still be cost effective, still be very efficient when we're implementing it, and also bring about sort of ways to automate the tasks that typically are not that difficult, but take a lot of time. And so this area that Brightpearl has settled into, this is really an important time for a merchant to lean on something like Brightpearl that is there to help them grow and really provide the ability to be agile, to try new things, to scale, to innovate, to connect, all that type of stuff that we know is really critical for these brands. So that's like the space where we sit in between the ERP and then those like more point solutions.
Love it. And just for context, for the listeners that are based in ANZ, there is no direct equivalent to what you guys do down here, but some of the systems that we see commonly deployed down here that are somewhat similar to Brightpearl would be platforms like Triquestra, Sin7, some of these Deer systems, some of these platforms that are trying to be retail focused like Brightpearl. But the one thing I know in particular about Brightpearl that's typically quite different to some of these other retail management or retail operating systems that might have an element of a pause and maybe an order management system built into them is the fact that you also have integrated financials. So you don't need to integrate to something like Xero to manage the financial side of the business, because you also have your own GL built into your platform and you manage the financials as well, as I understand it. Is that correct?
We do. Yeah. And what's nice is that we support really whatever angle it is a customer is trying to achieve. So sometimes you're working with an accountant or an accounting team that loves Xero or loves QuickBooks. And the thought of transitioning off of that can feel overwhelming, especially around, certain times of year. And so we recognize that and say, no problem. We have a really strong API, open API that will actually integrate with some of those systems. And in some instances, even have native connectors built with folks like Xero and like QuickBooks that are maintained by Brightpearl. So it feels, like you're working within the same space. Or if you are looking to transition off of something like that or not using anything currently, then Brightpearl also can support using our own GL functionality within our system. So we give merchants options to be able to do what it is they feel comfortable doing now, as well as giving them options for what they maybe want to consider doing in the future.
And you guys were originally headquartered, or still are technically headquartered in Bristol in the UK. So that's where the company was founded, as I understand it. But you've also got an American or North American headquarters based in Austin, Texas. And how long has Brightpearl been up and running, and when did you establish your Austin office?
Yeah, it's a great question. So Brightpearl's actually been around since 2000, and our founder at the time actually owned their own business. It was a skateboard manufacturing business that was growing really quickly. And the operations were only getting more and more complicated as he was growing. And they were in that space of pulling your hair out, being like, there has to be a better way to do some of these tasks. And as I mentioned earlier, it's usually more transactional, very time consuming, repetitive, but there was nothing really out there that fit their business and what their plans for growth were. Like an ERP wasn't the right space. They needed to do more than what an IMS or an OMS could provide. They just decided to build it themselves, and they wrote their own platform that took things like a lot of the areas you mentioned earlier, customer orders, inventory, purchasing, accounting, and that's what turned into Brightpearl. So in the last 15 years, there's been incredible growth, multiple rounds of funding. We have been in Austin for almost 5 years now. And in the last couple years, actually alone, we've tripled our revenue to 30 million ARR. We've seen about 115% increase in year over year new business bookings. The growth is there. Obviously, as I'm sure you've had in multiple conversations, COVID certainly had an impact where we're now transacting billions of dollars. We're at about 2.5 billion in 2019 and went up to almost 5 billion in 2020. So obviously COVID sparked that, but we're seeing really that growth continue to accelerate. And a lot of that too, I think, I always think it's really important, particularly from a software standpoint. And you mentioned earlier, my background in tech, where a lot of times we're shout about the new business numbers, right? Like, here's everything that we've done, here's what we've sold, which is great. But we're also, in addition to focusing on acquiring new customers, we really make sure to pay a lot of attention to maintaining the relationships that we have with our existing customers. And so we saw a churn rate last year that was at 11%, which is well below the industry average, particularly from an ERP standpoint. And now we've got over 3,000 customers all over the world. That success comes by just the way that we set ourselves apart from the ERP space, where sometimes you'll see a lot of turnover in an ERP, and Brightpearl actually has a 97% success rate on implementing. We have a 7-year customer lifetime value. So we're hyper focused on creating obviously the best possible solutions for our customers now, as well as the best experience. And in our most recent funding round, which was about a year ago, actually almost to the day, where we raised 33 million, which now has let us hit even more goals, as you mentioned, being both in Bristol as well as Austin. And now we're at actually almost 200 employees and have some plans to double that over the next year and a half. So been around for a while, but in some ways, like really just getting started, which is really exciting.
Super fun times to be part of the COVID-fueled rocket ship in our industry. And I think almost everyone is trying to swallow the demand. It's like trying to drink out of a fire hydrant at times, but it is super exciting. Now, just to clarify for everyone, I have a big focus on SaaS platforms. Brightpearl is a SaaS platform. It's a multi-tenant SaaS platform that also can be single tenant. I guess if you're a massive merchant that needs some sort of level of dedicated infrastructure, you can go down that path of single tenancy, but you're a multi-tenant SaaS platform that everybody's running the same version. As you roll out new features and functionality, as is true with all SaaS platforms, everybody gets access to that straight away as part of their subscription to the platform. Now, you've also got, as is becoming much more common nowadays, your own app store with integrations with many other omnichannel sales channels, marketing channels, fulfillment channels, etc. So you have out-of-the-box integrations with Amazon, BigCommerce, eBay, Shopify, Magento, all the majors really. And then, of course, some of those accounting integrations you talked about, other marketplaces, payments, EDIs, 3PLs, and the like. And when it comes to your app store, are most of those apps and integrations built out and maintained by Brightpearl? or are they built out by the third parties, or is it a mix of the two?
It's definitely a mix of the two, with more of them being the native apps built and maintained by Brightpearl. And it was part of our strategy to move into that direction about 4 to 5 years ago, when we saw, when you look at even over the past 10 years, what like the MarTech graph looks like in the world of e-commerce. It's insane. Like there are hundreds, if not thousands of systems out there, all designed to do certain areas really well. And I think for a while, we thought about trying to do a little bit of everything, sort of the jack of all trades method. And we realized that all size fits all approach is actually really an all size fits none. And so instead of trying to do a little bit of everything, we found like what makes Brightpearl unique, where our real power and expertise sits, and we doubled down on that. And instead spent tons of time, tons of money really creating this API and this app store strategy that allowed customers to integrate Brightpearl with those other best-in-class systems. And that's a strategy that we're continuing to look towards, even with our most recent acquisition of Inventory Planner, is bringing in a suite of products that are unique and native to Brightpearl, but also making sure that our system is open enough to really communicate very accurately and reliably with other systems out there that we know are super important for these merchants to be successful.
That's a great segue, because I was going to ask you next about the acquisition of Inventory Planner. And for those that don't know, Inventory Planner is perhaps the most popular Shopify app in the Shopify App Store around demand planning, inventory planning, sales planning. And what Inventory Planner does and did for Shopify merchants, it took all of the sales data over a period of time. It aggregated that sales data together and then sliced and diced it in a way that was understandable by the merchant. And then it would take into account things like lead times from supply to delivery. And also it would take into account things like sales velocity, time of year, all that sort of stuff, and help retail brands running Shopify that maybe didn't have something like Brightpearl behind the scenes, or didn't have something like an ERP behind the scenes, or demand planning software behind the scenes. It allowed them in a really cost-effective, simple way to be able to have some of those big player type functionality of demand planning, so that they could predict demand and accurately stock and hold the right amount of inventory without overstocking, so that they could meet the demands of their customers. And I know that Brightpearl has always had an element of demand planning built in terms of its reporting and analytics, but I guess you guys must have seen, hey, not only does Inventory Planner maybe have some IP that we'd love to have inside our system that goes beyond what we have today, but also we'd love to acquire their customers, because it allows us to then cross-market our technology as they grow. Because oftentimes with Shopify, although they've got like 1.7 million merchants, a huge percentage of those are smaller merchants that are popcorn that maybe has yet to pop. But if they do, then they're at some point going to need something like Brightpearl to evolve into. And I'm guessing that Brightpearl saw that and went, hey, this is a fantastic way for us to position ourselves for that next stage of growth for their smaller businesses.
No, you nailed it. I love talking about this topic, because this anecdote that I have specifically with regards to Inventory Planner is just makes me laugh now. But I remember when I first started at Brightpearl, which was almost about 4 years ago now. And on my second day, I saw a demo of Inventory Planner, and it's a quick demo. It's about 30 minutes from the initial round. And after I went through the demonstration, I leaned over to my colleague and I was like, this is incredible. Every single merchant needs this software. It helps customers understand, as you mentioned, Jason, not just like what's working right now, but also what the future is going to look like. This sort of like predictive analysis where they're forecasting demand and profit and how to manage your purchase orders and view all your inventory needs when you're selling on multiple channels. These are all things that are so critical to growth, and they were able to come in and simplify it and make it easy to manage and easy to digest. And that was almost 4 years ago. And now, most recently with this acquisition, we made that choice to invest in Inventory Planner because we wanted to be able to give our customers the best possible forecasting solution out there. And we knew, we couldn't build it on our own. When you have somebody like Inventory Planner already out there in their space and really owning it, it made a lot of sense to just integrate these two areas and make the relationship official. And so for Brightpearl, and in addition to just all the reasons that you mentioned, including the opportunity that exists to work with some of these almost popped brands, is it also represents like a really significant and first milestone in what our longer term strategy is, which is making Brightpearl a destination for brands by making sure we have and we offer the very best technology products. And Inventory Planner really sets the standard for that. And it will continue to be run as a standalone solution for folks who really are just leaning into it for that reason. But we're also planning to make investments in Inventory Planner and how it can evolve and enhance and actually expand into and within the Brightpearl space. So really excited for this investment for the reason that I mentioned earlier and just the excitement I had when I first saw them, but also for what this means as we look into the future with the opportunity that exists there.
Well, what I love about this is the fact that even within your monolithic ERP, your big boys and girls with like the likes of the SAPs of the world and even the NetSuites of the world and some of the other both SaaS and on-prem ERPs, is that their demand planning modules tend to be an additional module that you have to pay for one, but also they tend to be an extremely expensive modular component of the platform. And for you guys, obviously, if you roll this into Brightpearl, because as I understand it, and correct me if I'm wrong, when you buy or you license Brightpearl, you have a subscription to Brightpearl, you're not doing it on a module by module basis. You have access to everything as part of your subscription that Brightpearl has or is capable of doing. And as you guys continue to roll Inventory Planner functionality more tightly and weave it more tightly into Brightpearl, all Brightpearl customers will just simply start to benefit from that functionality as part of their Brightpearl subscription.
Yeah, absolutely. That's actually the reason why we lean so far into that term of retail operating system. There are a bunch of different responsibilities that sort of encapsulate what makes Brightpearl who it is. And they touch on all the different points that you mentioned, from how to operate all your sort of more retail tasks to gaining insight into your business to scaling through growth, which sort of sits at the heart of Brightpearl, where there is the option to add on additional areas that are relevant to you. But the suite of products that we offer is just Brightpearl. There's not an only inventory management product and only an order management product. That's why we built the product for what it is, because we knew we needed to bridge those things together. And so it's incredibly important to us as we look at the strategy for the next few years. And Inventory Planner was just like a great way to really kick this off, I think, by making one of the best investments that I think will really set the standard for what we look at in the future for whatever's next.
Brilliant. And at the moment, what is the split in terms of regional penetration or regional split of where Brightpearl's customers are based? Is it largely the lion's share in Europe and then a smaller percentage in North America and then everywhere else? What does your representation look like in, say, for example, the ANZ or Apec region? We don't come across Brightpearl that often down here. It's pretty rare still. And what are your plans for the ANZ or Apec region for Brightpearl, say, over the next 18 months?
Yeah, absolutely. So we, as I mentioned, getting started in the mid to late 2000s, we really honed in on the UK from a geographic standpoint. And a lot of the reason behind our move to the US is because of the opportunity that we saw that existed there. And so we've spent the last 5 years really broadening those horizons within the US, building out our team here that's grown almost double in the last 2.5 years, which is pretty incredible. I think Austin represents a really good place for us to sit just because of the growth in tech in general. And this city has been absolutely incredible. And so what's really cool is we've got some really close partners in the city as well some of which you mentioned, BigCommerce, ShipStation, which is really exciting to think about just the hold on e-commerce tech that we can even see growing in Austin. When we look at the next 18 months, it's absolutely doubling down on our efforts in the US. And when we look at our international expansion, Australia is first on our list. New Zealand, that focus is one that we've been talking about for a few years now. And so I think what we're really looking forward to is understanding what opportunity exists there, how it lies against like our own ideal client profile, for instance, when we think about the best best merchants for Brightpearl, what does that look like? These are folks that are typically selling finished and physical goods across a bunch of different sales channels. Usually our verticals are in things like health and beauty, luxury goods, jewelry, furniture, DIY, gardening, things like that, where they're typically focusing on either e-commerce selling or e-commerce growth that are on, the B2C or B2B space. And they typically fall within that 1 to 250 million annual GMV space. But we've gone higher in certain instances and we've also gone lower. So it really just depends on what the customer's goals are. And our focus at the end of the day is just about bringing some stability, I think, to a space that can sometimes feel a little bit rocky. And so when we look at what the opportunity looks like in Australia and New Zealand, there's a lot there that fits into those caveats that I mentioned. And so we're looking forward to really understanding that space, seeing what the need is, and then highlighting those differentiators that you heard me talk about earlier, that space between endpoint solutions.
And you've obviously watched somebody like, say, for example, Lightspeed and them acquiring other platforms, e-commerce platforms, POS systems, and various other technologies to try to build out their omnichannel prowess. Then we look at systems like Shopify, which has Shopify POS, and they seem to be slowly encroaching into other areas of retail operating system-like functionality. They seem to be picking winners and losers, both from amongst their partner ecosystem, but also the build out of their own internal functionality. We see other brands and technologies building out from an ERP core and getting into more the retail end of functionality and trying to add on more retail focused features and functions. So it feels almost every major tech player in the tech universe right now that has anything to do with omnichannel is trying to become a one-stop shop for retailers. If they can, they just come at it from a different angle. And is that kind of what you're seeing too? And you're saying, hey, we come at it from an operational angle, and at least for the time being, we have no desire to build out our own e-com front end, because at least as far as I know, you don't do anything with an e-com front end. It's all integrated, and so you're very open and agnostic around the e-com front end that a merchant may want to run. But is that something that is at all on your radar to bring out your own e-com front end? Or are you very much focused on primarily operational functionality, point of sale, and other channels?
It's a great question. And I think it goes back to a little bit of what I mentioned earlier of this jack of all trades, one size fits all type strategy, that when Brightpearl was really trying to figure out what the future looked like, it appeared to fall into that category where we wanted to try to do a lot or a little bit across a lot of different competencies. And when our CEO, Derek, actually joined the company a few years ago, Derek O'Carroll, I think that's really who started to challenge that philosophy and bring to the forefront this idea of, when you look at building out our platform, there's 3 different methodologies that your strategy will fall into. You're either buying something out there that already exists, you are building it yourself, or you're partnering with somebody who does it already currently. And obviously the strategy towards inventory planner fell in the buy bucket. But when we look at the other two areas between build and partner, a lot of our strategy is around building our partnership community. You've seen that happen with Shopify. We really do lean into coming in on our competencies and what we do really well, and just building out our integration arm to be really solid. And that is what our strategy will be like as we continue to look into the future. We are hyper focused on retail operations, and that retail arm of what we do is critical as we look forward to whatever comes next. And so that does not include jumping into building a space of e-commerce channels and falling in line with Shopify and BigCommerce, but instead continuing to make those integrations really strong, really reliable, build them out ourselves so that they're owned and maintained and built and facilitated by Brightpearl, we can really deliver on our promise to be the best in class solution for what we do, which includes that sort of open API strategy to link up to those other best in class systems so that together they really formulate this strength that allows our retailers to do what they need to do to be successful.
Love that. And what, from your perspective, are the biggest challenges? It doesn't necessarily have to be just COVID related, but although COVID obviously seems to be dominating pretty much every retail discussion we've had for the last 2 years now. And obviously, as each country deals with COVID in very different ways, down here in ANZ, our governments have taken a much more aggressive approach. And so therefore, lockdowns have been the number one tool of choice. And it's really hurt retail quite substantially and affected the economy in ways that it's always hard to even predict. There's a lot of unintended consequences in some of the things that our governments are doing. But and as a result of that, it's had unintended or perhaps unforeseen impacts on retail. And retail's need to adapt at such a really rapid rate of knots. And what are some of the biggest challenges that you are seeing across your merchant base as we start to come out the other side of this, and as we're starting to form a view of what our governments are going to do with COVID over the next 12 to 18 months? What are some of the biggest challenges that you guys are seeing? I'm guessing that supply chain and inventory management were some of the biggest things and issues that you're seeing, and therefore the acquisition of Inventory Planner was quite timely. But what other types of challenges are you really seeing across your merchant base that Brightpearl is either uniquely placed to help them solve for, or that you're looking to enhance in your platform to help them solve for?
Such a good question, Jason. Man, I feel like we could probably do an episode like just on this topic. It's a good one. I think you hinted at it a little bit earlier where you talked about the need for brands and retailers to be incredibly nimble and agile. And I think when we look back at the start of COVID, which is now 2 years ago, which feels insane, it was, okay, I know I need to figure this space out. I need to learn how to turn on a sales channel really quickly, or I need to figure out how to process my operations a little bit differently, automate my operations. But when COVID happened, it just expedited that need. And that agility, that need for agility has remained. That has been the most consistent thing that we've seen on our side. And so even with supply chain issues and inventory issues, as you mentioned, yes, of course, Inventory Planner was very timely for that reason. But where we've seen some other challenges are adapting to just the new buying behaviors and non-traditional shopping channels, where it requires you to, in order to be competitive, move very quickly. And if your systems are not there to be able to support that agility, then you're missing out on an opportunity. And as a result, really creating distance between yourself and competitors who have figured this out. And so I tell the story about one of our customers that works in the DIY home appliance space. And he talked about recently how he had started selling on Amazon at the start of COVID, and it was not going very well because operationally they weren't able to intersect their different sales channels with their inventory. And so as a result, they were overselling or running into out of stocks, which, as we all know, Amazon doesn't appreciate or allow really. And he was afraid. He was afraid to continue down this path. And that's what I mentioned earlier, this element of fear. And as a result, he shut down those efforts on Amazon. He was like, I can't do it. I can't figure it out. And that limited his business so incredibly amount that when we finally were able to pitch the idea of Brightpearl to him, that was his first concern was, are you going to be able to help me figure this out? And now after a few months of using our system, he has been able to spin up multiple new sales channels and sell in ways he never imagined he would be able to do, because he's got the support of something like Brightpearl to make sure that he can do this with confidence and take away some of that fear. And the need to adjust and be agile is going to continue to be at the forefront of everything we do. The challenge is making sure that you have systems in place that can really help support it, and that those new buying behaviors, we've got folks that want to shop on TikTok now. They want to shop on live stream. They want to shop on Pinterest. And a lot of brands out there, including really big brands, do not allow that. And so we did a report on this recently, this like sort of 'tis the season season shopping report where we pulled about 4,000 shoppers. And we found that almost 60% of consumers in the US, they want to and they plan on shopping on those non-traditional channels this holiday season, but 25% of retailers still don't provide options for them to do this. And they don't really have any urgency in changing that, which is especially concerning because retailers are going to miss out on about $300 worth of business for each consumer that has said they want to shop on these non-traditional channels. So it's about being able to diversify your efforts, do so with confidence, take chances, but feel confident in those chances and have a system behind you in the background really facilitating it. So definitely check out our report, which highlights all of those new shopping channels and preference this holiday season, which is just on our website at brightpearl.com.
Thank you so much, Sara. It's been awesome being with you. And I know as we come to our close of our time together, I know you've got to go, but really appreciate your time. A couple of very final questions here, and they're related. What is on the radar for Brightpearl over the next 12 to 18 months from a functionality perspective? Is there something that you can share that says, hey, in 18 months or 12 months from now, we'd love to be able to do X, Y, or Z that we don't do today, or we're going to enhance this functionality X because we just know that retailers need that functionality? And then finally, do you guys do all of the implementations yourself, or do you have a network of partners that actually implement Brightpearl alongside your retail merchants?
Yeah, great questions. So that first one, I will leave you with a little bit of a hint, which is to keep an eye out on our app store. So obviously you can see links to that from our homepage at brightpearl.com, but these are all about the different tools that you can use to integrate between Brightpearl as well as the other best-in-class systems out there. We are doubling down on our focus around inventory planner, around really like native connections within more of a financial space, predicting trends, understanding how that impacts different areas like your e-commerce site, your order management, your accounting, all those types of details. Inventory planner was kicking us off. We've got lots more plans around both sort of acquisitions as well as enhanced integrations. So check out that app store for more detail and exciting news around that. And then to answer your second question, which I'm so glad you asked because I hate that I didn't mention it earlier, which is so important to what we do at Brightpearl, is all of our implementations are done in-house by Brightpearl consultants who work for Brightpearl, who only manage Brightpearl implementations, who understand the space of e-commerce, the space of retail, how complicated it is, are very well-versed in our product, are also very well-versed within our different applications that we integrate with. This is actually, I believe, probably one of the main reasons, as I talked to earlier, about our own implementation success. We're seeing things like the success of 90% plus success rate of implementations. It's because we do these in-house. So if you're considering a system like this, be sure to ask your provider who's responsible for that, because it absolutely will impact just the overall success of the implementation and really making sure the money you're putting forth to this investment pays off, because it's not a fun one when it doesn't.
Absolutely. Well, look, thank you so much again for your time with us today on the podcast. Really appreciate you sharing your stories from the trenches at Brightpearl, what Brightpearl is all about, how it works, how it helps merchants to do and be better. And obviously there's a whole lot of data, and they can download the 'Tis the Season report, and they can go to brightpearl.com. If they want to get in touch with you, are they best to simply go to brightpearl.com, either booking a demo through there, or they can download there's a UK specific and a US specific Tis the Season report there. They can, I see they can download that directly from is it best that they just go to brightpearl.com, or would you like people to reach out directly to you, Sara Arthrell, on LinkedIn, or how would people best to get in touch with you?
Yeah, definitely check out the website. There's loads and loads of information, but I love making those one-on-one connections. So please, yes, find me on LinkedIn, Sara Arthrell, as well as shoot me an email, sarah.arthrell@brightpearl. Happy to talk whatever sort of things you guys want to discuss specifically with regards to retail operations. I love to nerd out around what it takes to really be successful in that space and hear stories and swap stories and things like that. So excited to talk to some more folks. And thank you again, Jason, for the chance to speak with you today.
Absolutely my pleasure. And we'll look forward to speaking with you again soon. Thanks, Sara. Have a great day. Thanks for listening to the At the Coalface podcast. If you want more At the Coalface, you can subscribe to our premium e-commerce and digital newsletter, At the Coalface Digest.